Great. So we all know how important it is to be able to ensure the quality of your data, and so that you can feel confident that there are as few bugs as possible. So we've been improving how Cypher interacts with its types, and that's what we're presenting here today. Now, at a storage level, we've always had types. I mean, it's an imperative part of a database to be able to store strings, integers, dates, and so on. However, up until recently, it has not been possible to use pure Cypher to interact with those types. So you haven't been able to query if a data value is of a certain type or enforce those types using constraints. Now, in Cypher, we have around 16 different types. As you can see here on this slide, there's quite a few, but there's also the supertype of any, the subtype of nothing, as well as dynamic union types. We've also added a whole range of different synonyms to make it easier when you're writing your Cypher queries. So I'm going to go through a couple of our more special types. So firstly, we have empty lists. An empty list can be defined as a list of nothing. And this will remain so until you add at least one item to the list. So if I were to add like the value Boolean, for instance, we'd now have a list of Boolean not null. Another special type to note would be the property value type. So a property value type includes all of those types that are storable in the database. So that includes strings, integers, floats, etc. What this doesn't include is values like maps, nodes, relationships, because you can't actually store those as a node or relationship property. So this one's actually quite useful if you want to check whether or not the value you have in your query is going to be then storable later on. And one final note of a special type is a closed dynamic union type. So this is more a combination of types. So if you don't care whether or not your number is an integer or a float, or perhaps if it's a list of integer and floats, then you combine all these together. And what use would all of these new types be without being able to use them? So in 5.9 earlier in the year, we added some new constraints. So we now have node property type constraints and relationship property type constraints. So for example, this allows me to now enforce that my movie title is of type string. So that means I won't have any bad data where my movie title is perhaps an integer. And then these are part of Enterprise Edition only. And alongside these, we've also introduced type predicate expressions. So these are a handy way of testing whether or not your expression is of a certain type. Now, an important thing to note here is that all Cypher types actually include the null value. So this can be a little confusing, but if I were to say, is null of type Boolean, I would actually receive true. This might not be wanted actually, so you can say null is of type Boolean not null, and then you'll actually get false back. We have finally added, very recently, as of the 5.13 release earlier this week, the value type function. So this is a neat little function which will return a string representation of the most precise value type that the given expression evaluates to. So in this example, I want to know what the value type of the number 1 is, and you'll get the string back integer not null. This works similar to how in other programming languages have a type of maybe keyword or function, but in Neo4j and Cypher, it's called value type. And finally, we've also been working hard on unifying our documentation and changing how the signatures in our show functions and show procedures commands work. So as you can see here, we now have the new types shown in the signatures and even closed dynamic union types. As you can see, node or relationship or map for the properties function. And we believe this makes it more usable and easier to read. Now, to shine some light on how we use these new features, I'll now pass you over to Louise.
So first, we will look at our data set for the example. So we have created a small toy data set which consists of our Cypher surface team at Neo3j, where me and Gemma are working. So this dataset contains nodes for each person, me, Gemma, and our colleagues, as well as nodes for our 2 team dogs. Each person has 2 properties, a name and is node presenter, while the dogs only have the name property. And as you might can see, even if it's a bit small here, the is node presenter data is a bit of a mess. Some of it is strings, and some of it is Boolean, and some of it is integer, and sometimes it doesn't exist. So you can see, for example, that Gem has is node presenter with the Boolean true, while I have it with the string true in this data set. So we would like to clean this data up, and we think it's reasonable that you either is a node presenter or you're not a node presenter. So it would be reasonable to use a Boolean. So then we can use our new property type constraints. So let's try to create a constraint. This is the syntax, similar to other constraints. You will call it a name. In this case, is node presenter. You do it for a specific label and a specific property, and we use this : notation, like that it should be typed Boolean. So let's try this, and it didn't work. And the reason is that we already had conflicting data. You can see that the error message says it's unable to create a constraint because we already have a node where the property is node presenter is of the type integer. And this is similar to how it would fail if you have, for example, a uniqueness constraint where you have duplicate data, or existence constraint where the property doesn't exist for all nodes. So let's inspect our data a bit closer to see what we can do about this. So first, we will just match all the nodes. In this toy example, we only had 7 nodes, so we can just do all node scan. If you do this at the real world example, you would of course use any labels and indexes as usual to make it faster. We then return the name, the node presenter, and use the new value type function to check the type of the isNodes presenter property. We can see here that for Nadia and Gem, the value type is Boolean, not null. So it's either true or false. For Natra and Love, it's an integer. For me, it's a string, and the dogs doesn't have this property. So then it will come out as the value type null. So let's then clean up our data. And this we will do with the following query. So again, we match all nodes. We use a set clause with a case expression with 1 branch for each different case. So first, if the isNode presenter is null, like for the dogs, we assume they are not nodes presenter and will assign false. If the isNodes presenter is of integer or string type, which we change with this, we check with the new type predicate expression. And in this case, we use the built-in conversion function to Boolean to change it to a Boolean. If it already is a Boolean, we'll keep it as is. And then we have else branch, which will not happen in our case, but just to be sure, we will set it to false in case it would be something else. And after we have done this query, our dataset will now look like this. So all the nodes have both properties, and the isNodes presenter is either true or false for all of them. Now we can try to apply our constraint again. So same as before. And what will happen now is it worked, because we no longer have any conflicting data. So now I've shown you how you can kind of investigate your data and how you can clean it up. But of course, while you have cleaned it up, you want to keep it clean. And this is where the constraint come in. So if we now, after adding the constraint, try to add a new team member in our team called Alice with is node presenter false as a string, it will not work anymore because of the constraint, and you will get a good error message telling you that the node with the label person required the property is nodes presenter to be of type Boolean, but it was a string. So now when you have seen how you can use this new functionality to inspect data, clean up data, and keep it clean, you might want to try it out yourself. We have a lot of new docs resources for this. Most of these are in the Cypher manual around both the new constraints, the type predicate expression and value type function, and also for all these types and synonyms that Gemma showed in the beginning. To access all of these features, you need to use the Neo4j 5.13 release that was released just a few days ago, or you have to be on Neo4j 5 on Aura. And last, I just want to say that we would love to hear any questions and feedback that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, hello and welcome to this session. I'm Oscar, and with me today I've got my colleague Nacho. We've been working together to improve the Cypher editing experience wherever you'd edit Cypher. So historically, it's had a lot of room to improve, I would say, and the only real place you'd get editor support is in Neo4j browser, where you get some syntax highlighting and some auto completions, but yeah. It's not super great. So that's why we started this project to make it a lot better. So today we'll walk you through a demo to start with, and then do an overview of the current state of the project. It's still early days, but yeah, I've got some stuff working at least. Then we'll go through our plans, and then we'll tell you how you can get involved, integrating this into your existing applications, or if you want to join us and build a plugin for an editor or something, how you can contribute. And then at the end, we have some time for questions. So, well, without further ado, I'll kick us off with the demo then. So here I've got a Neo4j workspace running. You can access it through Aura or just by visiting this workspace.neo4j.io domain. And right now we have live here, if you press this ... menu, you can turn on the new experimental editor. I've loaded a Stack Overflow dataset here. So as you would expect, you have some answers, questions, tags, and users. And I'll walk through some examples of what we've done to improve the editing experience. So I'll start us off with syntax highlighting. So I'll show an example of something that doesn't really work well in browser and or query here. So here you see this keyword here, transactions, doesn't get highlighted as a keyword because the grammar is kind of out of date, and the comments don't work either. So if we look at this in the new editor, we'll see comments get highlighted properly. You can see clearly that it's comment, and all the keywords show up as you would expect them to. Another common complaint in the syntax highlighting that is in browser today is when you clash with keywords. So if we remember the data set I said we have answers, questions, users, and tags. And as you can imagine, user is a keyword because you can use create user, drop user, and such. And that leads to this problem that I'm sure some of you have run into, which is your query just comes out one green mess. Like it says, it thinks that this is a keyword, but it's actually a variable. And I think that this is a label when it's, or it's a keyword when it's a label. So it doesn't really look good, and it's kind of hard to see what's going on. So looking at this in the new editor, we've made sure to understand your query before we add the syntax highlighting. So that means you'll get something that looks more like this. So we can clearly distinguish the label here. We can see a variable name, and we see another color here for the property key. So a bit nicer. Lastly, on the syntax highlighting, I have one more example, and that's using all of the token types that we support in Neo4j. So here we go with an example. This is a query I wrote just for this demo here, and we look for a question that's been tagged, where the title is this specific thing, or the uppercase is like the tag name is Cypher, or it has favorite counts, basically. So in this query, we have a parameter, we have a function call, we have a number, some operators, some strings, and of course the graph pattern data here. But it's not really easy to distinguish what's going on. So if we look at this with our new editor, it looks like this instead. So now you can clearly see here's a function call, the parameters get their own color, operators get their own color, numbers get their own color. Much nicer, at least in my opinion. All right, so that's that on syntax highlighting. I'm gonna move on to what we've done in the error space. So in the past, you needed to run your query through like trial and error when you got syntax errors. You didn't get any real help just from typing it. You'd try over and over again, and we didn't think that was a very good experience. So what we've built now is that we can test if your query works well without running it. So let's look at a few examples here. Here we have some spelling errors in this query. So right off the bat, we see this red here, unexpected token. Did you mean return? Well, yes, I did. And now we get a new error saying here, this variable is not defined. Well, yeah, it's because there's a spelling error in the definition of the variable. So we do that. Then now we're down to one warning. This relationship type is not in the database. Then let's try the completion there. So no, that's much better. So now it should run nicely. And then I want to show you another really easy error to make. And it's with administrative commands, and it's hard to know when which data type to use, so to speak. So in this example, I'm trying to create a user for myself if it doesn't exist with a new password, but I get this error here saying that it expected an identifier. So using this new tool here, I can more easily see what's going wrong. And then here it expected a string. So hopefully writing administration commands should be easier with this new editor. And then I will also show you some of the auto-completion stuff we built. So if I try to recreate this query here, and that can usually be tricky because at least I forget, is like, when should I do set and when should I do the password and all that kind of stuff. So let's see if it's easier with the completion that we built. So starting with the create, then I go to a new, then I'll trigger the completion here with control space, and then I can see a filtered list of all the keywords that can come after a create. So here I can see I can create an alias, I can create composite database, can constrain indexes, constraints, roles, that kind of stuff. This time I'm interested in user. So then I'm gonna type a name. At this point, it triggered the completion again. With control space, and then I can see if not exist or set is what could come here. So I go for if not exist, and then go for set, and then go decrypted, password, and then I can see this error message here saying, well, expected a string. So let's add a very safe password, right? So that's how you can use completions to make administration commands easier to type. And then for the last demo, I want to show you the example with all the token types again. So if we run that, and then we're going to see how much help we can get from the auto completion in typing this query with all these kind of different things going on. So I'll start with the match here, and then I'll have to type that out. Complete the label, complete the relationship type, complete that, where, question, title. Then I'll have to type this one out. There's input F or gonna get the function there. And question. So I don't know how smoothly it comes over from the screen sharing, but yeah, I can complete pretty much any data type here. And here you see the parameters I've defined. And then for the last return here, return, and then question. So yeah, that's how we've improved the auto completion as well. And that's it for the first live demo. So I hope you will like using this in the future, and I'll hand back over to Nacho to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Oscar. Hopefully you all can see my screen now. So first of all, just forward, go to Aura and create an Aura free instance, and you can try out these features yourself that Oscar has just demoed. I'm gonna give you an overview of the project. So far, we've added to this project syntax highlighting, which is, as Oscar demoed, the ability for you to get colored Cypher depending on where different constructs of the language, what the role of those constructs in the language play in the query. Auto completions, not only for keywords as we have here, but also for function names, procedure names, variables, properties, linting, which is the ability for you to be getting errors, and this time in your front end, in your client, in your editor, of what's wrong with a query. I will stress out, we accumulate the errors now, so you'll get everything that is wrong with your query. We are not firing background queries to the database as before to tell you what's wrong with your query. And these errors are 100% aligned with Neo4j. So whatever error you are getting in your text editor or in Workspace, then it means if you executed the query in the database, you will get the same error. And we'll be building on these features by adding in the near future signature help. So we'll give you for the function procedure name and the procedures, the type parameters and the description for the parameters. And we also give you for those procedures, functions, but also for other constructs in the language like keywords, information on hover of what they are supposed to do. And we'll be adding query formatting, so you'll be able to pretty format the Cypher queries that you've written in your text editors. I'm gonna stress out this. We care about your experience. So in the old experience, you will write a query in browser, and you will not get any error. You will fire it against the database, and you will get a semantic error, and you will be, oh, I'll fix that. So I'm gonna fix the person name there. Then you will execute it a second time, and you will get another error, and you will fix that, and then you will execute it a third time and get another error. So the experience wasn't great, right? So we listened to you. We've crafted this new experience where you are getting all these errors without firing the queries in the background. So you have the squiggly lines under what's wrong with the query. You can fix up all of your queries, and this comes very handy, especially when the queries are very complex and very big. So current structure of the project, of course, we had to pick a language, right, for our project. So we picked up the most popular language after English and Spanish, which is JavaScript. In this case, TypeScript. The repo, which will send a link at the end of the talk to, contains a core library that is called language support that contains all the logic for this syntax highlighting, linting, auto-completions. That library imports the grammar and the semantic analysis from the Neo4j official repository. So it compiles them into a parser and into a semantic analysis that we can use from there. On top of that, we build a React Code Mirror library that you can use from your web applications. So if you want to get that editor with the features Oscar showed embedded in your web application, you can use that package. And a language server that is what you will use if you want to build a plugin for your favorite text editor. In our case, we have a VS Code plugin, so we'll be providing that in the forthcoming days, weeks. We'll be releasing a first version of that. That's important bits. We have a package that hasn't been released and is embedded in the language server, so you don't need to care about. And we have a demo in the repository that we deploy to GitHub pages, so you can check out that as well. So the important bits: React Code Mirror library, the language server, and the language support from that repository. Of course, we are going to tell you about our plans, not without my favorite gift in the world. We care about the text editors. We want to deliver you the same experience that you have in Workspace through text editors. This improved experience, not the old one, of course, that had a lot of room for improvement. So in the forthcoming days, weeks, as I've said, we are going to be releasing a first version of a VS Code extension. And if I quickly can demo that right now, 1 second. So hopefully now you can see my VS Code. This is a demo of that VS Code extension that I was talking about. It is connected to the same database Oscar was connected to in his demo of Workspace. So I can get the same auto-completions that he was getting, but also the same label types or relationship types. So if I want to search for questions that have been tagged with the Neo4j name, and I see, okay, you are missing a return, right? So, yep, I can get the same kind of experience, same auto-completion, same linting, and same syntax coloring that Oscar was talking about in his workspace demo. So, as I was saying, we'll be releasing this extension very shortly. Let me go back to the presentation. So hopefully you can see my presentation back up again. As I was saying, this was regarding the VS Code extension, but in our plans is to make an IntelliJ plugin as well, backed by this language server, because we care about the developers that are using IntelliJ, which are a lot of the Java, Scala, Kotlin community. And we'll be also releasing something for Jupyter notebooks, because that's where data scientists normally write their queries. So we also want to deliver a good experience for them. Not only that, we have an internal command line tool in the company. Not an internal, sorry, I mistakenly said that. This is Cypher Shell. You get this when you install Neo4j, so it is not internal. This is internal though, the demo of it getting auto-completions, which it never had And this is work in progress. We are working hard on this, and we'll be delivering those auto-completions as well through Cypher Shell, backed by this language support. So this is probably the most important part of the presentation, how you can get involved. So you can either integrate this editor in your web application by downloading the package in NPM. I'll stress this is an alpha version, so there are no assurances on how stable the APIs are for neither of the packages that I'm gonna mention, but you can start trying it out. So React Code Mirror for the Code Mirror editor that you can integrate into your web app. But you can, if you have another idea for how you could use this directly using the core library, the language support library, you can also use that package directly in your application. If you want to get the auto-completions or the syntax validation or the syntax coloring, you can be doing that through the library directly. But what about if you were the one to deliver, for example, a plugin for your favorite text editor, Emacs, Vim, or any other? Like making a text editor plugin on top of a language server is actually not that difficult, and we want your help, and we think it will be a really cool contribution to have in your CV if you wanted to integrate this into your favorite text editor. So you can also do that, installing the language server through NPM, integrating it into your plugin for the editor, the text editor of your choice. And please give some love to the repo. Give us some stars. The repo is github.com, neo4j, Cypher language support. Is open source under Apache 2 license. File bugs, we'll make some tests for them. Or if you want to ask for any feature or open an APR, we are always welcoming open source contributions. Yeah, thanks a lot for coming to this. Obviously, I couldn't leave this without a joke, right? So if you use Notepad, these features are not going to make it to you, but we really hope that we can deliver a better experience for you. And this is your time to take the stage and make us some questions. So maybe I can go into the Q&A. Maybe you can take them alternatively, Oscar.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so let's take the first one. Stefano says, is control space the best to trigger auto-completion? I'd intuitively try with double tap. Someone already answered, but if you want to answer that.
Yeah, I can say the control space is the most common way to like force trigger completions in editors. But most of the time you will not need to type anything. So if you get started on a keyword, it will like automatically trigger a completion for that. So if I just type R, I'll see return. But if I haven't started something and I want to kind of bring the panel up anyway, you can type control space. We considered doing double taps as well, but yeah, we'll see. If I think if it's a common request, I think we could make it configurable, at least in Workspace. Or otherwise, you can build your own Neo4j tool and you can have it be whatever you like.
Exactly. Isn't it configurable in Code Mirror completely? Like you can configure. Yes. So if you integrate the Code Mirror package we talked about, you can choose your own character to trigger the completion. I'd say in VS Code, traditionally is control space as well, but you can choose your own through configuration probably. Okay. Do you want to read the second one, maybe?
I think there's one question about basically about Cypher syntax. So I think they're better served, and it's also already answered by Martin. But I'm going to move on to Stefano's next question and how it works with merge statements. If a label or property may or may not exist, how does it deal with that? No highlighting at all, infer by structure. So if you don't mind, I'll answer it, or should I? Yeah. So on create and merge, we always infer from structure if something is a label or if it's a property or that kind of stuff, and we take care to only warn about missing labels or missing property keys if if it's not a query that could be creating them. So create, you will not see missing label type, right? Because it could be the first label of that type, but in a match you would, and that's most obvious in queries like create database. Well, when you run create database, you wouldn't want us to suggest the databases you already have, right? It makes no sense. But if you stop a database, then we do suggestions. So we have quite a few of these pieces of logic on where to not give suggestions, even though the structure of the language would imply that this is a place where a suggestion would do. And that, because we have to do these like manual decisions, like is this creating or using at some spots, there will be bugs and room for improvement as well. So we'd be really happy to see bugs and open issues on the GitHub to see where, well, we expected this, but I got that, and let's see how we can make it even better.
Yeah, in the case of merge, as Oscar has commented, we treat it as a create in that sense that it could be creating the label, so we won't warn you. But of course, this is the experience that we would expect for ourselves. It may not be the way other users are writing queries. So please give us feedback on what you are struggling with, these errors, this syntax highlighting, so that we can improve that and accommodate it to how most of the people are writing Cypher queries.
All right, do you want to take the next one? Casper?
Yes. Casper asks about Eclipse integration. Well, he first says, seems very good. Thanks a lot for the compliment. We are working really hard on this. How about Eclipse integration? Well, it is not in our roadmap at the moment, but as we've said, creating a theme client for any editor seems fairly straightforward and easy, that you can check out the VS Code extension that we have in our repository for an example. If you just want a wrapper on the language server, right? If you want more features like being able to control the connection to different databases and executing the query and getting the results in your text editor, then that's not logic that lives in a language server. So you will need to build up that logic in the plugin. But if you want to make a plugin for Eclipse that is just using the language features, that wouldn't be that difficult. Unfortunately, we don't have time to deliver for all the text editors in the world because there are a lot, but we welcome contributions. We all love open source. So if it is important to you, we are open to giving you help with that, receiving open source contributions from the community.
Yeah, I think for the last one, there is, I'll just want to show Veronique, I think I said it correctly. If you stop sharing, I can share how you would turn it on in Workspace, just because it might not be super simple to do. All right, so I'll try to be quick here.
I'll answer quickly the question for Nicola. Is the grammar going to always be updated with every Cypher release? Yes, that's how it's wired right now. We crafted a new antler for grammar that is still experimental, but is delivered with Neo4j. At least partially. It's not yet used in Neo4j, but it is going to be aligned with what Neo4j is capable of doing. Coming back to Veronique question.
Yeah, right. So you've integrated it into the main Neo4j repo, that it's part of their build steps to keep our grammar up to date as well. So that is less manual work than the previous stuff. And yeah, so just to show again how you would integrate this. So you would visit workspace.neo4j.io and then click connect. Then to connect to a local one, you first need to type localhost here and then pick the scheme like this. So this is how I would connect with Workspace, right? Now, when I've got a working connection, we can see here, I've got some random data over in this top right end here. That's where the experimental toggle is. And if it doesn't show up, you should try a force refresh, because the Workspace project has some pretty aggressive caching, I think, or at least has had in the past. So that's how you would go about using it. And otherwise, another way to just, if you want to try it out, you could head over to our repo. And over here, we have a demo. So you can just press this link, and that will launch you into this demo page as well. So,
okay, and that's a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for joining my talk and welcome. My name is Elena and I work at RLE International, which is an automotive engineering services provider, and I'm a Neo4j ninja. So if you've read my abstract, then you've seen a lot of things about magic and knights. And actually, that's going to be the theme that I want to stick with today as well. So what we're going to talk about is the adventure of a knight trying to rescue the princess from the castle tower by fighting the dragon. And now imagine you're the knight. Then you might want to plan your adventure. So you might think, well, what kind of actions do I need to take and how long is it going to take me? So let's just look at very short adventure that it could be. So let's say it's really short. So you just need to ride to the dragon cave. You need to fight the dragon and then free the princess. Really good. Let's assume this takes like 4 hours. Then you need to fight the dragon, takes 1 hour, and freeing the princess also takes 1 hour. Then, of course, the duration of your complete adventure is going to be 6 hours. But let's assume you're not alone. Let's assume you have another companion with you. So maybe you can split tasks. So maybe you both need to still ride to the dragon cave. So still going to take you 4 hours. But then your companion can fight the dragon. That's nice because you're at risk getting harmed. And in the meantime, you can free the princess. Great, and this adventure already is shorter, so it's 4 and then a parallel 1 hour, so it's 5 hours. Okay, cool. But what if you're not the only ones? What if you're one of the knights of the round table? And what if there's way more to do? And even before being able to go to the dragon cave, you need to find Excalibur and need to have the Holy Grail ready. And maybe you can split these tasks between your other knights, and some of which can go to the Excalibur, some of which can go on the quest for the Holy Grail. And maybe even before that, you need to go to the Enchanted Forest and find that witch and get the magic potion of strength, and so on and so on. So what if there's a lot more to do and you can split things between the nights? Well, I didn't want to sit here and just write a lot of Cypher create notes to come up with some big scheme, but I wanted to show you, and that's one of the first things that I want to say here. In a lot of projects that I face, actually the schema of the graph is quite ready, or we kind of know what we want to do, and we want to do some algorithms on it, but we don't have the real data yet. Especially if you want to build up knowledge graphs with the knowledge of your employees, for example, that's a process where you need to grow the graph and you don't have that in the beginning. So what can you do? Well, for example, you could start using the mock data generator that has been introduced by Neo4j at the beginning of the year. If you have not seen it yet, there's also going to be a talk by Jason Koo actually in around 14 hours in the Americas time zone, so you can check that out. But in that, you can't do some things that I want to show here. So for example, you can give a schema saying, okay, well, I have some actions and I have other actions that precede these actions. But in our case, we need a graph that is circle-free, right? So you can't have something that precedes another action and then goes back again. So the complete graph needs to be circle-free. And hence, you need your own logic that does that for you. And actually, I'm going to quickly clear the database. That's so that nothing's in there anymore. And I'm going to show you a user-defined procedure that I wrote. So this is actually a user-defined procedure which generates a graph for me. And in this case, so I'm just giving it some config that I configured before the talk. And actually, I'm giving it a seed. So what it's doing is that it's not creating all the time the same graph, but there's some randomness inside. And I can provide a seed and then get different graphs. So in this case, for example, I said I want between 90 and 110 nodes, and giving different seeds will get me different amounts of nodes in this interval. So let's quickly run that and see what it gives us. So in this case, we generated 94 nodes, 249 procedure edges, and actually 4 nodes are at the beginning. And let's quickly have a look at that graph. So here it is. And I'm going to make that a bit bigger and zoom in a bit. And what you see is a lot of actions in there. And you see also some blue nodes. Well, these are just some auxiliary nodes here, marking the start and the end to be able to draw it a bit apart. So let's zoom in a bit more to the beginning. And as the summary already said, there's like 4 nodes that directly are connected to the action 0, so that don't have a predecessor. And actually, if I want to ask now, so for these 94 actions, what's the duration of my adventure going to be? Then I need a graph traversal, right? I need to go from the very start to the very end and then calculate the earliest start times of the actions and the finish times, right? Okay, that's quite easy for the first 4. Well, they can start at hour 0. Nothing is preceding them. And they have a specific duration. Like in this case, this has a duration of 18. And so it means needs 18 hours to complete. And then after that, other activities can start. So, but we have to be cautious because, for example, this activity cannot start directly after these 18 hours because there's another predecessor, right? And so that's very convoluted here. But there are other nodes, like I think, for example, this one here, that can actually start after action 13 is finished because it doesn't have another predecessor. Okay, so that means we need to iterate through the whole graph. So how would we do that? How would we write this algorithm? Maybe your first thought could be, well, I'm just going to write a Python script that sends transactions to this graph and just traverses it using Cypher. Great, and that's exactly what I did. So let's quickly have a look at some code. So I wrote a Python script that's quite short, so it's 68 lines. And it doesn't do much. Well, there's some initialization going on here at the beginning for the starting nodes. We shouldn't worry about that right now. But basically, there's this loop that just processes the nodes over and over again from the start to the finish until there's nothing left anymore. And let's quickly look at that. So basically, this function is really easy. It just calls a transaction with this Cypher query over and over again, which matches the actions where all the predecessors have already been finished, and then takes the maximum of the finish times of the predecessors and puts that as the earliest start of the successor node, and also calculates the earliest finish of it by just adding the duration. And like that, we can proceed from the beginning to the end. And at some point, we're done and we have the duration of our complete adventure. Let's quickly run that. So it's now executing. And normally in my test, it took around like 3 seconds. And we see that here. Great, it took 3 seconds. And I'll look again at the graph. And if we now return the earliest start and the earliest finish times, we see that they have been filled now. And we actually see what we saw in the beginning. There are 4 nodes that can start at the beginning. So they start at hour 0. And here we have the node that we saw earlier that has a duration of 18, which finishes at 18. And down here, we have the action 34 that we saw earlier here, which starts after action 13 is finished at hour 15 and then just goes on until 23. So now we can see how long this is all going to take, and it's going to take us 444 hours. Okay, But what if that's even bigger? What if we don't have like just 100, but maybe 1,000 actions? So there's a lot of to do. Again, I'm using my user-defined procedure to generate the graph. And this is already taking a bit longer to generate the graph than just in a second. And then we'll see that there's going to be a lot more nodes being created. Some seconds more. And then we'll have that. And I'm not going to go into the details of this graph because it's just going to be the same graph, just a bit bigger. Okay, here we go. We have 994 nodes and a lot more relationships. And now if you want to run our Python script again to see what the adventure is going to be like, let's quickly do that. We'll see that it's already going to take a bit longer than before. And of course, sending these transactions all the time to the database takes time. So in this case, it took 6.74 seconds. And the bigger your graph's going to get, the longer this is going to take because you need all these transactions because the Python code is outside of the database and it's sending the transactions inside the database and always fetching data, sending, fetching. Okay, how could this be done better? So I'm quickly going to reset the database here. So I'm going to delete the earliest start and earliest finish times. So let's check that this has really happened. So on the nodes, there's no earliest start and earliest finish anymore, but I still kept the nodes. And actually what you can do is you can write a user-defined procedure again. So the user-defined procedure lives inside of your database. It's not doing transactions from the outside, and hence it's much quicker. So let's also quickly have a look at the code of that. So I also implemented that in a user-defined procedure. And it might look a bit bigger and a bit more scary here because it's a bit more code. It takes like 188 lines. But I wanted to be very specific with the comments. So like most of that stuff here is comments. So I think at the end, it's also like just 80 lines of code or so. And if you see that as well, we switched the language. So we went from Python to Java because the user-defined procedures are written in Java. So let's quickly have a look as well. So we have a procedure here, which takes the start node as the beginning, does as well some initialization. And basically there's a while loop here as well, where we loop through the nodes and do stuff on the nodes. So we set the earliest start and the earliest finish of the successor nodes that can already be processed. And the nice thing here as well is you can use whatever you want in Java, right? You can use, for example, queues where you store the nodes. So you don't need to fetch them over and over again after a Cypher query is finished, but you can actually store the node objects of the database and then execute stuff on them. So what you need to do with the user-defined procedure is deploy it into the database. So I already did that here. And you can then call it just like you saw with the call for the graph generation. So I'm just going to call this forward path method on the action 0. And we'll see, okay, instantly after 0.1 seconds, it's done its job. And let's look again at the earliest start and earliest finish times. And we'll see it calculated. All right. And let's go back to the slides again, because I want to show that in a table. So I did already one more test. So I tested it with 10,000 nodes, and you see that the Python takes already way longer. So it's already at 80 seconds, whereas the UDP still performs in under a second. And this is because in Python, or using the Neo4j driver in any language, basically uses all these transactions that you need to do against the database, whereas the UDP lives inside the database. And actually, in a project that I implemented at the company that I work for right now, we had the case that in the beginning, we were also writing our algorithms in Cypher just to test them out, just to see how it's going to work. And a whole graph traversal took us about 5 minutes. And then we transformed everything into UDPs. And now it takes 3 seconds. So that's a factor of 100. And actually, you see that in this table as well. So let us look at the benefits that we get when we use UDPs. So first of all, you have a high efficiency and a high speed. You see that here. The UDP is much quicker because it doesn't have to do all these transactions against the database, and it just lives within the database. Secondly, it's really nice that when you traverse the graph, you can just stop at any node and do whatever you want and do as many complex calculations as you want. on this node, and then proceed without losing track. So of course, you could do that in Cypher as well when you have a lot of complex statements, one after the other. But then it's quite difficult to keep track of where you are. And the third, and for me, a very important point, you have the full power and luxury of a high-level programming language, right? You can use whatever data structures you like, so you can put your nodes into hash sets or into queues or lists or whatever you use in your daily life of coding. And you can use seeds, which is really nice for us as well, because if you implement your algorithms, you maybe want to run the algorithms on a million different configurations of your graph to see whether you've not implemented any bugs in there. So you can run a billion tests just by using different seeds, and then also realizing which seed's going to cause you a problem, and then debug on that seed. So actually, what I didn't really talk about today is the refactoring safety and type safety. But actually, I was invited with a colleague to Neo4j Live. There's gonna be a session on November 23rd, where we're gonna talk about how to make your code type safe in the UDP context. So you saw that here. So my code is also available on GitHub. So everything that I showed today, you can just have a look into that and see whether you like it. And if you want to know more, please get in touch. Don't hesitate. I like talking about UDPs. And yeah, with that, I hope you enjoyed my talk, and I wish you a great time at all the other nice talks at Notes. And I'm quickly going to look at maybe some questions, but I don't see any. Well, there's maybe in the question. Did your Cypher solution take 5 minutes? Use the new quantified path patterns? No, so the Cypher solution that lived 4 years ago, so that's already a quite long time ago. So no. So there's another question that I'm quickly going to answer. So if you don't mind, once created all the nodes and their relationships, then if we want to display the graphs for the particular required node of all the relationships, so how can we do it as per required separately? So I don't get the question. Sorry. If you could just message me in the chat, I will just answer the question as well later. All right. Can you show how UDPs look like? That's another question. So I showed the code quickly, so maybe I can just show that again, and you can have a look at the GitHub. So this is a UDP, right? This is a procedure that is written in Java that has this procedure annotation, and then it's just plain Java code, basically. And there's maybe a last question. I didn't try UDP yet. How did you put it into the database? So what you need to do with the Java code, you need to compile it. So in VS Code, there's you can just type maven clean install. So it's a Maven project, or like in NetBeans, it's clean and build. And then you have a jar file, and you need to put the jar file into the plugin folder of your Neo4j database. So if you go to the Neo4j database, there you have the 3 dots. You can just click on that and go to the folder that contains the database. You've probably seen that from the import folder. And there's another folder next to it, which is called plugins. You just put it in there, the jar file that you generated, restart the database, and your procedures are available. Okay, and with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for your attention, and I'm going to go offline. Thanks.